The broadcast has been set. The broadcast has been set.
Thank you. The time is now 5:02. This is the public session. 1.1, 1.2, call to order and opening statement. Good evening and welcome to the January 26, 2023 fiscal year 2024 proposed budget work session of the Prince George's County Board of Education. My name is Judy Mickens-Murray. I would like to take a moment to thank my colleagues for their vote of confidence on January 12th, 2023. My personal commitment is to ensure all students acquire the knowledge and skills required to become productive and independent citizens upon graduation from the Prince George's County Public Schools. I look forward to the administration sharing tonight their fiscal year 24 proposed budget, hopefully identifying student-focused resources, for example, increased tutors, mentors, teacher aides, and technology, just to name a few. Thank you. Tonight, we have Spanish interpretation services available. Ms. Lopez, would you please make an announcement that Spanish interpretation is available to viewers by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of the screen?
La interpretación en español está disponible para los espectadores haciendo clic en el icono del globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Haga clic en este globo y seleccione Spanish.
Thank you. This meeting is currently being
Alexa,
streamed. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, Shayla, how you doing?
Sorry, the baby's Alexa was playing. I thought I turned it off.
That's okay. This meeting is currently being live streamed via YouTube. For viewers who are not able to observe at this time, the meeting is also being recorded. This information will be on our board webpage and also available on the Prince George's County YouTube channel for later viewing. The Board of Education has convened this evening for the sole purpose of engaging in a question and answer session on the fiscal year 2024 proposed operating budget, which was presented by our CEO, Dr. Golson, at the December 8, 2022 board meeting. Roll call. Ms. Lopez, please call the roll.
Yes, Madam Chair. Mrs. Adam Stafford,
Present.
Mrs. Busser Strother,
Here.
Mr. Briggs, Mr. Briggs, Mr. Sorong Ruiz, Mr. Fields,
Present.
Dr. Harris,
Present.
Mr. Jackson, Mrs. LaSalle Frazier,
Present.
Dr. Juanita Miller, Dr. Juanita Miller,
I see Dr. Miller. She's on mute.
Present. I had myself on mute.
Okay.
Dr. Zipporah Miller,
Present.
Mr. David Murray,
Present.
Mr. Valentine,
Here.
Ms. Walker,
Present.
and Mrs. Mickens-Murray.
Present.
We have quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you. 1.4, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda for the January 26, 2023 budget work session?
So moved. Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it and the agenda is adopted. Budget discussion topic. This portion of the agenda is designated for budget questions and answers. Each division is allotted a total of 30 minutes for board members to ask questions and administration to respond. I will now yield the floor to Dr. Kenneth F. Harris, II, Chair of the Operations, Budget, and Fiscal Affairs Committee, for any comments or remarks on behalf of the committee and to facilitate the remainder of the session.
Thank you, Chair Mickens-Murray. Colleagues and staff and public, good evening to all of you. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'll make my comments really quick. I'm excited to work through this first budget session for the FY2024 upcoming year. As Chair Mickens-Murray said, we'll be doing question and answer today. The topics that we will be discussing, academics, accountability, operations, and school leadership and support. Next week, we'll be discussing business management services, the Chief Executive Officer, including General Staff, Chief of Staff, Human Resources, and Information Technology. I remind colleagues that we will be doing it by department, more or less, and we'll be restricting us to a 5-minute round and a 3-minute round to keep time on moving forward on all these things. I do want to share with you all that collectively, we submitted 61 questions beforehand for this work session. Really excited to talk through these questions and seek additional clarification if you do need it as we work through this process. Really excited to see how far we've come in terms of the budgetary process. Thank you to Ms. Howe, as well as our former CFO, Mr. Herbstman, and thank you, Dr. Golson. I'll turn it over now to you to introduce staff, and then we can keep things rolling. Also, colleagues, please use the raise hand feature so I can call on you when necessary. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Golson.
Thank you so much, Board Member Harris. We're going to go in this order: the Division of Academics, then the Division of Accountability, Division of Operations, and the Division of School Support and Leadership. But because there are so many folks on the screen, what I am going to ask is that for PGCPS administration staff, if you are not in the first group to go forward, if you could cut your camera off, so that at least those who are part of the academics team are visible on the screen, and then board members. There you go. Thank you, because there were 67 of us on the screen, so that may help a little bit. Our goal is to try to spend around 30 minutes for each division because we have limited time and we must conclude by 7 for the public portion of this process. So without further ado, I will first begin with the Division of Academics, Dr. Judith White and her team, who are prepared and ready for questions. Thank you.
Board members, are
Dr.
there any
White?
questions?
I see board members Adam Stafford's hand up.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. White, for the responses to the questions that I put forward in the original document. I just had a few follow-up questions. One specifically, I know that you mentioned that the school district would be adopting or undergoing a textbook adoption. I believe we talked about that in the AAC meeting. I wanted to know 2 things. Have you all budgeted for a possible curriculum audit? Also wanted to get a follow-up on in the textbook adoption process, are you all also considering an entire curriculum adoption, or is it just a specific textbook? And so I just wanted some clarification on that.
Sure, no problem. So our curriculum audit, right now we are in the process, and you all approved us to move forward with our social studies curriculum being audited. In the past, we have already been audited for our high school RELA and mathematics curriculums. MSDE was in the process of auditing all of us for our elementary and middle, and due to the blueprint and other priorities, that's been pushed aside. However, we have done work over the last year with Johns Hopkins to begin to have our curriculums looked at, one, to make sure that it's aligned to our student learner profile and our instructional framework, and looking at our standards. So we've started that process. That process will continue. As it relates to, additionally, I would say in 2015, 2016, 2016, 2017, we had all of our curriculum, reading, math, and social studies audited by an outside agency, and we begin to make changes. So we'll continue in that process. We'll continue our work with Johns Hopkins as we move forward. In terms of textbook adoption process, when we adopt textbooks, we adopt the whole series we utilize their curriculum. I mean, we follow the pacing. We just build out a curriculum map to go along with the materials that we use. A lot of times when you are adopting textbooks and textbooks go in a certain order, you don't want teachers necessarily to follow the textbook in order based on the standards that we have in the state of Maryland. Textbooks are not written for the state of Maryland, so we have to build those curriculum documents in scope and sequence to ensure that our teachers are following along.
Progress.
Thank you, Dr. White.
No problem.
Board Member Valentine, and then Board Member Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for joining us tonight. Just two questions, and they are a response to some of the response that you all sent to board members with questions around, particularly the summer school report. What jumps out at me is the Acceleration Academy and the Middle School Intervention and Enrichment Program, and how well it exceeded expectations and was able to really close gaps. And so my question is, how can we use what we learned in these two programs to scale throughout the rest of the year to address some of the issues we're currently having around literacy and mathematics? And my second question is particularly around the district literacy specialist. And you can see that there are many of our mathematics coaches that are actually in the classrooms. But I wanted to know, what is the ratio of literacy specialists and math specialists to those who are math and literacy instructors, and whether there is a best practice or a goal as far as a ratio. Having 16 literacy, mathematics literacy coaches, to me, doesn't really get to, help me out as far as whether those 16, when they're not in the classroom, but actually supporting math educators, are overworked, or whether they're able to actually serve all of the math educators who need the help. And so just talk a little about what we learned over the summer, these summer programs, and how we can replicate that throughout the year, but also how we can reinforce our literacy and mathematics specialists to ensure that they're doing what they need to do, but doing it at the level of demand. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. So summer school, we were very excited, and we'll have a report coming forth soon that will show all of our programs and how we established goals and we worked. In the summer, it's easier because we actually shorten the amount of standards. We go and look at all the data throughout the year, and we look at those critical standards where we identify the students are struggling, and we build a plan around that. And it's very condensed, it's very isolated. Kids are working on that alone, and then we're able to checkpoint on it. Throughout the year, we really do the same thing, but you have to realize too that we're continuing in instruction for year-long instruction, as well as taking the data, identifying where students are having issues, concerns. We're utilizing the interventions as a part of the classroom instruction. And so the students are working at their own pace, as well as teachers pulling small groups to work with them in areas that they need acceleration and or where we need to fill gaps. And so it definitely, we try to utilize the strategies that we've done throughout the summer to make them meaningful. Also in the summer, we do wraparound supports, which we also do during the school year. So it's definitely something that we continue to keep a lens on, because we want to make sure that those practices that we find in any pocket that's a success, that we're replicating and finding ways to see it at a broader level. So as we continue to find those areas, I will be sure to bring that up and share it as we come to the board to continually share out. Your second question was around our literacy specialists. When we were provided literacy specialists, one of the things we do is we build capacity in adults. In our teachers is we took time to look at the data. We looked at the star ratings back then of where schools were, and we made sure that we included, so I believe, in Dr. McDaniel, please correct me because I could be wrong. I believe that each of our specialists has up to 2 to 3 schools, and they work with them in terms of building capacity and sustainability in schools around practices. Our goal is to build succession in schools. It is to get us to a place where our schools are not dependent upon our specialists or our literacy coaches or our numeracy coaches, but it's to build capacity so that they begin to know how to do and move the work. So how teachers should be forming good lesson plans, how a great collaborative planning should look, how to sit with you and work on your lesson and how it should be engaging with students, how to interpret your curriculum. So we try to build a model where we don't stay in one place every year, but we try to build with the resources that are in schools to build their capacity, and we build on. At this point in time, we are only stretched across our middle and our high schools. And I actually, between our coaches and our specialists for the literacy side, in the areas, core contents they support, we actually hit I believe almost every middle and high school. In terms of our numeracy coaches, we've had to really be strategic in the middle of the pandemic before our staff was deployed to schools, and we had to break them apart. So I may have picked a coach because I only had hate to say, you are only the first grade coach, you are only the second grade coach, so that any teacher now had one person that they could continually work on. The other thing that we implemented since 2020 in the pandemic was office hours. And we do those office hours at various times to accommodate our teachers in their schedules. Because we know, especially when school starts and throughout the year, teachers have need support, have questions, want to know quick tips when they're engaging in creating lessons. We've created those office hours every week where they can call in, drop in, and get the support and coaching that they need. That model really has looked different right now because, as you stated, our teachers or our coaches are actually all back out in the classroom. And so we still try to find ways to support. We still try to do some office hours. It's just not as robust as it would be if we had the staff back in our building. So a specific ratio I do not have. I can, if you'd like, be able to tell you how many at some point, not this evening, how many schools each of our coaches and or specialists, or what our model looks like. I could provide that to you if you'd like.
Thank you. How much more time do I have, Ms. Lopez? Just to have the follow-up. Well,
That'd be a question from Ms. Burton.
I mean, it's really quick.
We're
So
like at 22 minutes and 11 seconds.
no, for me, I know I got
for.
Well, I'll be quick. I mean, we're spending more time.
You have 2 minutes.
And so my understanding is a lot of this, hopefully what we learned over the summer can and potentially could be used as a lesson learned for some of our learning hubs. And so how is it possible that we can, whoever was over the summer program and whoever was, sort of running that can be brought up to date and support those who are working with those hubs, because I mean, clearly the numbers that jump out at you, but you got 56% increase in math, 39% increase in RELA over the summer. That's outstanding. I mean, and so I guess the more direct question, what are some of the obstacles from us actually getting those same results throughout the school year?
Yeah, I just think our natural day-to-day in a school can be an obstacle. And I say that because in the summer, our same curriculum team is building the same curriculum documents. We tailor it to the time that we're going to meet with students. We limit the amount of lessons that we provide in the scope. But when we're in a classroom, we're trying to go through a year-long curriculum, anything happens on any given day. And so we are trying to replicate those same things. And we are building our lesson plans the exact same way. I just think when you have students for a 2-hour period or a 3-hour or 4-hour, if you're elementary and you're really honing in on a smaller amount of content, it's easier to grasp versus we're trying to do a year-long curriculum and curriculum keeps moving. And so I think the pedagogy, the strategies that we utilize are the same. I just think that we have to continue to look at our data, make adjustments in the classroom immediately when we get our data back, and continue to push forth our curriculum.
Thank you.
Mr. Fields and then Vice Chair Walker.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. I want to follow up on Board Member Valentine's question regarding the summer school program, because I was also just amazed at the results from this program. And I understand the difficulties in replicating the program during the regular school day. But what I'm interested in is how do we increase the capacity of parents to be able to support these children who've gone through these programs, to give them the tools so that these children can sustain this acceleration that they've achieved through the summer school program. Because I think in particular, the scores in math just jumped off the page. And I just thought that was amazing given what we know the challenges were coming out of COVID. So is there any thought to how we might be able to incorporate our parents to make sure that they are given the tools so at home during the regular school year, they can continue to support their child?
Yeah, I think we would agree with you. Also, I just want to note that in our summer school programs, our classroom sizes are smaller. We try to do that intentionally so that teachers can really have a chance to work one-on-one with students. We actually do a lot for our parents. I think what we have to work on as a system is by which means are we communicating and by which means are we bringing them in. Our school leadership side that's going to present later this evening actually do a lot. We work in partnership with them. They have monthly meetings with our parent constituents to come in and to learn about what's going on. We've created documents on what your child needs to know. In terms of pre-K, we've created a site in the summer that not only tells a parent that, but we created videos. So if you want to know how to do that with your child, we created videos to go along with it. For any of our community partners, we created a document that says, hey, if you have our students in the summer or any program through the year, this is how you can help them in reading. These are the things you can talk about that relate to math. So we continually try to find ways. We do know that sometimes a lot of information is too much information. So I think our goal needs to be, how do we consolidate? How do we rebrand so that parents know when you need assistance, here's where to go. The other thing we want our parents to know is that we don't need you actually to be the expert, because we have things like Tutor Me, where a child that's struggling can go on and get assistance 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so we will continue in partnership with our school side to find those ways to really make the rich resources that we're creating more available and more accessible for our parents to understand how to support at home.
Thank you, Dr. White. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. White. I love that you talked about the resources that we have. And I think as board members, what we can absolutely do is help to get that word out. So as you talked about Tutor Me, I'm like, I really should be leveraging that myself as a parent. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And I think we can help with that. So action item. What I wanted to ask inside of this session, District 9 is heavily populated with specialty schools and charter schools, which I'm excited about as well. And when I take a look at the testing, research, and evaluation section, I'm wondering, is there any consideration to look at the testing a little bit differently for those schools? Let me tell you why, in case I'm not framing a question correctly, is because right now, especially visiting some of the principals, what I'm hearing is that we're comparing apples to apples, yet within the course of their day, which let's say is 8 hours, they really only get 4 by the time they're really pressing forward to what their specialty is for that school. And so I'm just wondering, is there any consideration as we move forward to take a look at that testing within the next year?
So if I hear you correctly, well, let me start by saying this. All of our schools, regardless of whether you're in a specialty program or not, are going to teach core content.
Yes.
So when we look at core content, the one program that I would say we sometimes have to look at differently is immersion, simply because we provide students, sometimes they don't get English, teaching them English until they get to 2nd grade, but then you'll start noticing their scores by the time they get to 3rd grade. They start having their assessments in English. So although they're learning French, Spanish, Chinese, they catch up very rapidly because they're immersed. Our other schools, regardless that they may be focused on science or creative arts or other areas, they still are being taught the same curriculum around reading, math, science, or social studies. The other thing I would suggest is some of our programs are lottery based. And so our students are coming in from all over, different pots, different, parts of the community. So is it your suggestion that we look at them against themselves? Tell me a little bit more of how you think we should look at them.
Absolutely. I haven't thought through this completely, but I will. One of the things I was just wondering is if there's any comparisons across the state that maybe we look at them in comparison. So everyone has to get math, science, and arithmetic.
Yeah.
However, let me just be clear. I'm not asking us to lower standards. What I'm asking us to do is be able to test based on everything that they're learning. So if it's immersion, if it's primarily STEAM, if it's something, how can we test those so that we're making sure that we're comparing apples to apples and not oranges to oranges? So what I will take away is to brainstorm this a little bit more, maybe come up with some proposals for you and say, hey, does this sound good or bad? But I'm just looking at, in the budget, have we thought about, I don't know, is there money in there for us to even do a test for a school? Maybe.
So accountability is speaking tonight and they handle testing. So I'm going to save that part of your question for them.
Oh, is that accountability? Thank you, Dr. White.
No problem, no problem. But what I
you.
will say is for us, I do look at immersion to immersion to immersion. I may look at creative performing arts to creative and performing arts, but I'm always going to look at every school for reading to reading to reading because they're taught the same curriculum.
Thank
So if you want to think about it more, and then you want to come back later on with a question about it, not even tonight, we will gladly, definitely look at what you bring forth.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hey, colleagues, I want to jump in here really quick. If you do have additional questions, we do have staff taking notes of those questions and it'll be sent to the appropriate department and you'll get a reply back. Also, just a heads up, we've got about 12 minutes left with Dr. White. So please be brief with your comments as we get through first round. I'm going to go Mr. Briggs, Board Member LaSalle Frazier, and then we'll jump to Board Member Adam Stafford for second round.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Harris, and hello, Dr. White, and to everyone else. I was just curious if you could speak to the results from the summer enrichment program. I know that we had set some pretty clear standards based on funding that's coming from the state. So I'd love it if you could just kind of expound more on what those results were and if they really met the mark for what we hope for with students in ELA and math. So
what I would say is in the questions that I provided, I put the exact goal that was stated for each of those programs. And then we look at data a couple of ways. First, when we're establishing programs, we want every program, especially those three, our elementary, our middle, and our high school, to identify goals. Those goals should be smart. They should be something that we're striving to achieve. I believe most of them wanted students to increase by 20 percentage points. We do a pre-test when students come in, and then we teach the content, and at the end, we do a post-test. In those scenarios, if you look at the data that I provided, it definitely will tell you how much they increased. And then on top of that, what we look at, which we didn't before, and I think it's a very relevant point, is to look at attendance. Because if we had 20 sessions and you come 20 sessions, my expectation is that child should grow. If you come 5 sessions, but I look at your data and you didn't grow, I need you all to know that child only came 5 times. So I will be providing a report in the next probably 2 to 3 weeks through Dr. Strader's office that will have every program we had in the summer, the goal they established, how they performed against that goal in the attendance. And so that way you all can see. I will note that some of our ancillary programs, not those main elementary, middle, and high. As we go forward this year, I'm going to be working to make sure that every program in any of our schools has a SMART goal. So we don't just want to say we want to get better in reading. We want to say, what is the goal that you expect for these students when you finish, and we want to measure against it. So you'll have a more comprehensive report in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But the data, that specific data that you're asking for is actually typed out in the response.
Okay, thanks so much.
No problem.
Hello, how are you?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So I hear you say that smaller classrooms, and we know as educators that smaller classroom size works and individualized one-on-one works, right? Those are the things that we know for a fact across the nation works. So I'm wondering, have we given any thought in terms of creating smaller pods within schools so that our students do get that individualized opportunity? When we have huge schools, our students are not able to get that when we have big classrooms. I'm wondering about that. And then the second question I have is, we talked about the parent resources. Have we given any thought about what strategies or what interventions can we do for those parents that are not able to access the TutorMe because they may have limited technology skills or may not have the literacy skills themselves? So how are we working to address that gap?
Sure. So in terms of the smaller pods, our students or our school administrators will participate in an SBB process that identifies the number of teachers they have, the ratios, and through that process, they identify the number of students that should really much be a ratio of teacher to student. For as much as we would love, we have funds for like ESOL ratios, Title I schools, even if we could right now have smaller class sizes, we know that we don't even have enough instructors to do so. So we have to think creatively, differently, innovatively when we think about that, which is why when we work on our curriculum documents, we've really tried to work a process where we build intervention in the framework. So now where we're looking at some of it where you come out and not only building it in our frameworks of where our teachers are teaching, but in the school day, how do you get them to work on a schedule in their classroom where they're doing whole instruction, and then they're pulling students. And then while they're pulling a set of students or other students are working in different projects based on what they need. So we try to really do a lot of differentiation, especially at the elementary level. In terms of our parents, we are so blessed to have our parent engagement assistants in many of our classrooms. I mean, many of our schools, especially our schools that are highly populated with parents who may not understand the language, who need additional support. And they do an amazing job in ensuring that our parents have the resources that they need. They're able to call. And again, our family support office runs that program and assists parents when they need support. We try to have a lot of also parent evenings, especially from our ESOL department, to ensure that when things are going on in the system, that we're really communicating with our families and trying to have open access when they need support. I know that by no means does that grab everyone, because sometimes parents may not access us or utilize us. So again, we have to really be creative and think of other ways to get parents more involved. And we try to really make sure that our students, especially students with families where they know they won't have as much support, understand how to go home. We try to send those directions, not only in English, but in other languages, so that a parent can access in the language that they know from their home. That we found has really helped us.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. Board Member Adam Stafford for round two.
Okay, thank you so much. And yes, Dr. White, I was so excited to see those numbers. Second year in a row, the Acceleration Academies, the Learning Hubs doing such awesome work. So thanks so much to you and your team. I wanted to ask specifically about, I know we spoke in our last Academic Achievement Committee meeting about bubble students, and now that the Accountability Department has determined students that are on the cusp in both math and ELA, would additional funding for tutoring for those slices of students at the tested levels be beneficial to support them in getting those 6 additional points? I think that's excellent that we know exactly where they need to be. How can the board support in supporting those students getting to proficiency? And then I think my last question here is about RTI. And I've asked over the last couple of years about how we can support educators in participating in the response to intervention system. And I know that the district has developed its own internal system, which is awesome. And I know what I hear from teachers are that there's just not enough hours in their day to enter all of that data. And for my colleagues, response to intervention, these are ways that we can track and support students by providing them with interventions as we see challenges in behavior and academics and what have you. And so, would additional funding to support some dedicated time for educators to, track that data and make those connections with parents, do you think that would be beneficial?
So the first part, I have to write this stuff down because you all asked such rich questions. The first part of your question talked about our tutoring programs. I am happy to announce that we will be continuing our tutoring opportunities going into school year 23-24. And so we have everything, we're definitely spending time, and the process that we have to go by to report out allows us to see like where are our wins and what are ones that we need to really think about not proceeding with for various reasons. But I'm happy to announce that we are continuing because we know that it matters. We know that in the classroom it matters, and we're trying to find those ways to ensure that students get that support within the school day as well. So that is a plus. The next question you asked is about RTI. So according to our negotiated agreement, our teachers always have time where they're able to do their planning. That's where they're looking at their data. They're doing, working on their, not necessarily in collaborative planning, but their own planning time. And so as a part of that process, and when they work on their grades, they're also looking at their data. They're identifying which students have what. We try to build out very specifically for our teachers what intervention works for what type of student, and we lay out how to get on We try to provide interventions that allow students to work at their own, like where they are, that adaptive piece, so that our teachers aren't having to do a lot of planning. They just put a student on, it identifies, it moves them through. So when they get that data back, it's just like they're entering grades. It's just like they're working on a lesson plan. So currently, no, we do not provide additional funds for that because it's a part of what they would naturally do during the time provided to them based on their negotiated agreement.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I guess, you know, thinking about how, in terms of the tutoring that you are securing for the upcoming year, is any of that specifically going to be used for just in-person tutoring? I know that we have Book Nook, and that's a great resource for families. But will any of that encompass some in-person tutoring? And
And it's possible that it may, but one of the reasons, just so we're all clear, that we really try to focus on, and we had to shift our models, not that we don't want to be in person, but we know that transportation was an issue, keeping students later in the day was an issue. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't have other hindrances. We keep students after school and then we can't get them home, or something happens because our buses are routed different places. So there were other ways. We know that our teacher shortage. So when our teachers are willing, we want to make sure that teachers get home, get set, and then they can still be able to do what they need to do at home and do their own work and then work with students. So where in the past, we absolutely would love to be in that model. There are some of our schools that have some of them in person, but there are some that are online. So I think we will continue to monitor that because we do know that that interaction is important. What I will say to you is that the majority of the interventions that happen after school have to be really no more than 4 to 6 students. So it's still really a small group of students with each of our teachers and educators, which still makes it nice. But we will continue to look at that model, look at our resources, and where we can try to provide those opportunities where students can be in person.
Thank you, Dr. White. Okay, last 60 seconds, board member Blue Strother.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harris, and thank you, Dr. Goldson, our former CFO, Mr. Herbstrom, and Lisa Howell, and everyone who contributed to this budget process. Once again, it is clear and outstanding in terms of our ability for them to participate in this process. One thing I wanted to look at sort of a bigger picture question around, we are now at a place where we have the blueprint for Maryland's future plan, strategic plan, Equity Plan 2026, Climate Change Action Plan. I wanted to ask about Dr. White, and then this question probably would apply across all divisions, the connectedness to the plans and how we are moving as a district. And if I'm thinking of it more, is it all working together? Is it clear? Are you feeling that all of the employees are connected to these plans, and I'm really thinking about the critical success indicators. So that's one question. And then more specifically around actual budget items would be reducing absenteeism, because we could talk about academic instruction all day, but if the students aren't in the classroom, they're not receiving it. And so the strategies in this budget around absenteeism would be another specific question. Thank you.
Thank you. What I would say is, first, I want to thank Dr. Kyra Libby and under Dr. Strader, our research and evaluation team, but our accountability team, strategic planning, that works on our strategic planning. Because as a system, we're really trying to focus on what our strategic goals are in that, which are our CSIs. Every time when we wrote for that and we wrote our LEX plan, then we have our own internal, like special education plan and our ESOL plan, and now we have the blueprint. We have to ensure, which they have been making sure that we have done, is continually have the same people at the table talking across teams and making sure that what we're saying in one document, we're saying in the next. So we shouldn't have in one place where we're saying something for ESOL and now we have to write somewhere else about ESOL, and we're bringing up all of these new things that don't align. So alignment is necessary. Alignment is necessary for our school partners internally and externally to know that we think through this and that we are trying to have collaboration across the district of stakeholders to make the decisions and to make sure that we're aligned across all of our plans. In terms of absenteeism, I will gladly turn that question over to my colleague, Dr. Helen Coley, whose team will be presenting last this evening.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank
I
you
would just
for your-
like, while I have an opportunity, to just thank my team. I was able to answer the questions, but for John Paul Cadet and CTE, Lee Gibbs in Creative Arts, Kia McDaniel in Curriculum Instruction, Gladys Whitehead in Early Childhood, Tony Brooks, who's my instructional support, and Trinell Bowman in Special Education. Just thank you all for being here to support in case I needed you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for kicking it off. Thanks for going first.
No problem.
All right. Dr. Strader for accountability. You're up. Board members again opening the floor for 5-minute rounds and then 3-minute rounds while individuals are looking, or while individuals are coming back on camera and board members are thinking through their questions. I do like what Dr. White was saying in terms of the enterprise approach to make sure things are well connected and following along that same train of thought and path. So I'm glad to hear those conversations are being had. So questions on accountability, the floor is now open to any board member.
All right, good evening all. Just want to do a mic check.
Yep.
Thank
Can
you.
hear you. All right, I'm not seeing any hands for accountability. I just want to confirm from board members, we do not have any questions around the topic of accountability for tonight's. I see board member Adam Stafford, and I see someone else is trying to get my attention, but I can't
That
see
was
you.
me, that was me, Board Member Harris.
Okay.
This is Dr. Gold. So just to remind Dr. Strader to respond to the question around testing that was presented in the previous session from one of the board members.
Okay.
But obviously, you'll leave whenever you need him to get that response. Thank you.
Sure thing. Board member Adam Stafford, you mind if he answers that question first, and then we'll jump into yours? All right.
Sure. So the question around the alignment between our strategic plan, the LEX plan, the state reporting aspect, as well as the blueprints. So right now, you're right. There are many initiatives that are at the forefront, and we are doing everything that we can to align these initiatives. And so is MSDE. One of the issues that's very unique with the introduction of the blueprint is that it's legislative, right? It's legislatively controlled. And the blueprint was derived from a cluster of a bunch of best practices out there that the legislator pulled together, put it in this package, and then pushed out for us to comply with. So there are many challenges with complying with this legislation the way it stands right now. I do know that the Accountability Implementation Board, the AIB that sits over top of the blueprint, they've pulled together a committee of folks to look at the outcomes that are expected of this and to also set those common data dictionary, those common standards for us to be able to report this data. Because right now it's all over the place. And this is a problem that each district is facing. So when we look within our own internal strategic plan, we're doing everything we can to align the expectations of our CSIs with the state reporting. And inevitably, that should align with what's being requested of us through the blueprints. So as an example, the languages, the definitions we use behind those CSIs are those very definitions that we have to report to the state. On track for 9th grade success, graduation, the definition for our graduation rate, dropout rate, the definitions for chronic absenteeism. So we're doing the best we can to align all of this, but it is a lot. So hopefully the goal, and I know MSD shared this with us, is to align everything into one streamlined program. But unfortunately, this is going to take several years to get to that point. So, Board Member Struthers, that address that question?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for your response. Board Member Adam Stafford, are you ready to ask? Okay, yep, you're go ahead, and then Vice Chair Walker.
Thank you so much. And hi, Dr. Strader. I wanted to ask about just data transparency. I know that several board members just had questions about how we could share information on the many assessments that our students take in real time with communities and families. And I know that you all have developed the parent portal, which is providing a lot of access for parents. And I know that I believe each individual school has a dashboard, and you can correct me here, it has a dashboard with information. But even as an aggregate for board members, so that we can have an understanding of how the district is performing on the various assessments. So I just wanted to know sort of like if you all had plans for developing some type of system-wide data dashboard, and if that's something that you're foreseeing in the future.
Yes. So right now, what you're experiencing, following each of our assessment administrations, we produce the executive summaries for those. They're actually on our research website. They can be accessed there, and generally they could be forwarded to you all for your review. So for instance, we're working right now on the MCAP release. So the data that we have to receive the executive summary, which is usually 1 to 4 pages that summarizes the overall performance within our district. So we have those out there. You're right, the schools have their profiles, of which you can go out to each of the individual school sites. You can click on it. You can see a variety of information, assessment data, as well as chronic absenteeism, discipline data, all of that information, their enrollment broken down by the various student groups, all of that's on the school profile pages. So what we're working towards now is we're building a district profile. So not only similar information you can see at the school level, you can see at the district level. And that's going through this year's release. And again, we're just getting involved in that now. The second piece we're doing is building the dashboard for use to see or have access to our progress for meeting our CSIs that are attached to our strategic plan. So there will be an inward-facing dashboard for all of our schools to get the student level detail and the sensitive information, as well as an outward-facing for our folks to stakeholders similar to you to be able to access that. This is also, we've had to modify the board policy on data dashboards. And so we're trying to align all of that work together. So when we get this out there, we're compliant and really meeting the needs of our stakeholders and moving these efforts forward.
Thank you so much. And I even wonder if maybe down the line in the future, if there could be some type of dashboard for some of the recommendations that have come out so that we can even know as board members where some of those initiatives stand, like the climate change, the ELL work group, because there were so many recommendations over so many different years across so many different departments. I know that I would have difficulty understanding sort of where the district stands on implementing any of those initiatives. So that's just a thought there.
So as we're talking about budgets, I will share that we are building much of this in-house. We had the opportunity to purchase some off-the-shelf solutions that were very targeted to look at academic indicators or particular things. We decided instead to use our own monies to build this in-house to allow that flexibility for us to evolve in our strategic plan, as well as to be able to adopt our dashboards for whatever other requests may be there. Now, of course, there's always cost associated with adding to, but at least we have that technology in-house and we can do whatever we need to do. So I would say if there are things that you're interested in doing, we can have those conversations and see what we can do.
Thank you, Board Member Adam Stafford. One question for me, Dr. Strader. I know you mentioned the in-house development of the data dashboard. Did you mention anticipated rollout of updates or anything like that?
So we phase those out as they're made available, similar to the cohort launch. Remember, we shared with you all as a board phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of the release of this. So we are just now, instead of putting this all off on the 24 budget, we're actually trying to implement some $23 as well to get this effort started sooner. So we will share with you all a timeline with that phased-in approach so we can share those components with you as far as those releases. So I don't have those as it stands right now, but they will be forthcoming.
No problem. Appreciate it. Board Member LaSalle Frazier.
Thank you. I'm going to piggyback on what you were saying. That was one of my questions, was when are the different pinpoints of when the data is going to be rolled out. I just wanted to offer that I've been looking at a lot of different dashboards across the country. And one of the ones that stands out for me is the one for the state of California. It's very visual. It allows any parent to be able to look at it and quickly see where we are without having to dig deep. So they have the red, orange, yellow, green, and blue colors, and it allows us to see beyond test scores. It just allows for a complete picture without having to really have to dig through the different pages. So I'm hopeful that we can come up with a model that's similar, that's very visual for parents that may not be as academically savvy as others.
Thank you for sharing.
Board Member Fields.
Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Strader, I don't know if you can answer this question, but I'll pose it. There was a question posed about the increase in student enrollment because we saw a pretty big projected spike. I'm wondering, is there any coordination between the district and the county when you have developments in the county that there could be an influx of students in the district? How closely do we monitor that so that we're not impacted sort of by surprise by huge residential development that gets built and you have more families in the school district, and the next thing you know, the school district is impacted? And given, you know, our school construction schedule, how do we monitor that and try to control the influx of families into the district in a county that continues to have sort of rapid development?
Okay, so I can address the how we're doing our predictions. The county policies regarding that you're alluding to in the second part, you know, when you start hitting those percentage of capacity, you know, and the shutdowns of districts and so forth, I'm going to have to defer on that one. But let's talk about the projections first. So as we responded to in the comments, the projections that were included in the book were at the time of the printing of the book. So those projections are actually less than what's in the book that you're referencing right now. We've had time to be able to go back and implement some additional policies, going through a process that you're suggesting actually. So our projections, we actually do that. It's a cohort model projection process where we're following a group of students across the grade levels. So not only do we look at increases in rates, the typical rates of students that transition from grade level to grade level, there's also manual manipulation due to those variables that you're suggesting. So we work very closely with county government, development envelopes. We look at, you know, where our projections are, working with very closely with the county and what they're seeing in those residential developments versus business developments and so forth. Through that process, we have several iterations of publishing our enrollment projections. So if you go out to our website now, you will see actually the final ones that we're using and that we've just completed that state process, the final ones that we're using that will be included from this point forward. And you'll see that they're actually lower than the ones that you see within the budget book. Historically, we've been less than 3% error in our projections. Actually, if you look at most grade levels, we've been within 1% error, which is phenomenal if you were to look at what other districts are doing with especially with a district that's our size. So our process has been fairly solid. I can say I've worked with many districts in a similar process. But take a look at the current projections that are out there. And I can shoot you the link as a follow-up for this so you can see where we are now.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
One additional question from me, Mr. Strader, or Dr. Strader, sorry, is in regards to, I'm actually gonna steal Mr. Fields' question here. It's in regards to the $4 million decrease in Title I. I know we asked this question in advance and you all gave the response. Can you speak a little to the fact that it is a placeholder and historically what the margin has been for it changing between what we see now and later down the line when we actually have a more realistic number in there? Can you speak a little to that?
I can. So the numbers that you're referring to here are actually the restricted funds. That's the federal grant funds. And the federal grant issuance process is out of sync of our budgetary process. So when we call that a placeholder within the budget book, that truly is what it is at that point in time. What I will share is that this year, what we're expecting from the U.S. Department of Education is actually a little higher than what we received last year. So if you want to get an idea of where we are in the process, you can actually look at the fiscal year 22, 23, and you're going to see the trends rate. You know, we're following very closely what it's been in the past. This year, the only changes that we're really looking at within the department, we've added additional schools to the Title I family. Again, if you look at what's happened in the trends with free and reduced meals and our poverty status, we're increasing in our families. So that's increasing those needy students within our schools, which, you know, we're trying to evolve. And so we're pulling more of those schools into Title I family to support those students. So we are now, I think we're adding, and I think Natasha, the director, is with us here. She can be more specific, but we're adding several schools anyway, and she'll send me the exact number. But in addition to that, we're actually looking to grab more central office resources that we've typically used for various purposes, a couple staffing positions, liquidate those so we can provide those additional funds to our schools. So we're a little less top heavy in the central office area and trying everywhere we can to get as many of those dollars forwarded to our schools. So the short answer, we're expecting a little increase from where we were last year in the overall funds, and our schools, they're going to experience a little up and down because we've added more schools, but we're also trying to decrease our central office expenditures and get those to schools.
Thank you. Board Member Adam Stafford, and then Vice Chair Walker.
I'll let Vice Chair Walker for her first round.
Thank you, appreciate that. You switched on my screen. There you are, Dr. Strader, how are you? I hope you were listening in when I was asking academics about accountability. So I won't ask that question, but hopefully maybe you can answer it if you remember. If not, I'll send a specialized note with me putting some thoughts together on it, because I have a different question right now. My question is, excellent. My question is, with these boundary changes, when they happen, as my colleague said, that we get an influx of students in different schools. And I'm wondering if you can talk to me about how we see that in a budget. How does the money flow within the budget to accommodate?
Okay, so there's several line items that several of my colleagues can respond to that. So in other words, there's operations components, right? So as we're looking at school construction and doing things of that nature, you have costs associated with the schools that these students are going to be attending. So you will see some fluctuation within our operating budget. And again, I'll let Dr. Fawcett talk to those things. And working with the CFO and on the finance side, really where you're going to see, and this perhaps is where you're getting to, as we shift the students around, our office people accounting school boundaries actually goes through the exercise of that boundary, of those boundary changes and moving our students around accordingly. Those we call the allocations for our schools, for school-based budgeting, the SBB cycle, is dependent upon the enrollment counts for those schools. So a big chunk of the money that for those schools will be reallocated based upon those new populations of students within those schools. And then of course there's fixed funds for building operations and so on. So our processes of how funds are allocated will actually work itself out as we shift the populations of students around these buildings. Does that help?
Thank you. I don't know that this falls within your district. So please let me know if it doesn't. As these funds start to shift, one of the gaps that we have really is having enough teachers inside of our classrooms. And so even though that money might shift over, where is it that I talk about how are we increasing funding for the recruiting and retention of the teachers that we currently have? Is that you?
That is not me. So
okay, who can I ask that? Who am I asking that to tonight?
Okay, I'll have Dr. Golson chime in and point to that. I don't think it'll be the person that's on this call.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold on to
hesitating.
it. No, Dr. Goldson is like, no, it is not tonight. So thank you so much.
And so Board Member Harris, the number is 10. So we've added 10 new Title I schools this year compared to last year. So just give you a heads up.
Thank you. Does that conclude your comments, Vice Chair Walker? All right, Board Member Adam Staff.
Thank you. Dr. Strader, I had 3 questions here, and I don't know how much time we have left, but I can certainly get answers to these online if we don't have time. I know that
I was gonna say you got about 10 minutes, but your round is 3 minutes. So you can ask them and they still get answered, but you get go ahead and get it out.
Appreciate that. I know in the parent portal, you'll be providing information to parents about assessments and their student scores. Some parents have reached out to me wanting to know if possibly there can be some like additional instructional supports included in that resource. I don't know if that would be like a really huge lift. I know you were saying you all were trying to cut down on the paper that you were sending home to parents, and hence why it's on the parent portal. I don't know if that would be like an extra expenditure to direct them to instructional resources, but I did have a few parents reach out wanting to know specifics on how they could support students after they receive that information from the portal. That's just something that I wanted to raise. And if you had thoughts on that. Additionally, I want to know if you all had plans to do an equity audit. I know many districts across the nation are undergoing equity audits at this time to help them better allocate ESSER funding and in different pots of money to think about, where are some of the biggest gaps. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And then lastly, I was wondering, since we're talking about dashboards, plural, have you all considered developing an ESSER tracker or dashboard? I think that would be extremely useful for board members. I do appreciate the reports that we've received. However, it's hard to get a comprehensive understanding of where all of the ESSER funding has gone, like in categories. And what are the trends over time and what have been the impacts of that spending. So a possible ESSER tracker or dashboard or something that we can look at in a comprehensive manner, I think would be really beneficial.
Okay, so let me start with the first one. Looking at the parent portal with additional instructional supports, let me get back to you on that question. I'm going to need to work with Dr. White and talk through that. I will share that the parent portal first release is going to be sharing our internal assessment results. So all of those in-house assessment results, that's what's first going to be available. And then as a result of the Academic Achievement Subcommittee, we're also talking about the feasibility of including the state assessment results into that portal as well. So right now, our bills are looking at including all of the assessment-related data. But your comment is well taken here of looking at, can we link those additional instructional supports to that effort as the next step? So let me get back to you on that one. The second piece, when you're talking about equity audits, I'm going to defer to my colleague in HR, Dr. Baldwin, because the equity office falls under her. And this sounds like an effort that Dr. Reese would be undertaking, so I'll defer to her on that piece. Is that right, Dr. Goldson?
Well, I'm just going to add in, thank you, Dr. Strader, but that our strategic plan honestly is based on our equitable work that we're doing throughout the entire district. And we use that to inform what drives our work and really is our roadmap. And it also has performance measures connected to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is embedded within our strategic plan, but if you're talking about particular audits type, that's very good. Okay, then last, the ESSER dashboard, I will share. So when we're looking at building the dashboards right now, this is not on our radar. It's not on our priority list because ESSER has a shelf life. That's why if we're looking to invest now in building dashboards, we would be more so inclined to build towards the blueprint and the blueprint outcomes as they're being defined, perhaps looking at the pieces that I've shared with you already, our district dashboard and looking at our student performance as well as our cohort trackers and so forth. So that's not on our radar, but hopefully we're still able to meet your needs and tracking this information, via non-public facing pieces that we can still make public to you via paper or, PDFs or whatever else we can do for you. Okay.
All right. Sorry. That concludes your comments, Board Member Adam Stafford. Yes. All right. Dr. Z Miller.
Good evening, and then thank you all, Dr. Goldson and team. As we submitted the question, I'd like to thank you for the comprehensive responses that you gave us to as we dug through the budget. My question is really a piggyback on Adam Stafford, but I think it's a different slant to it. On Monday, we had during the academic achievement, Dr. Strader, you spoke a little to it. I think it was Ms. Bowers who spoke to it with the new parent portal about how the data portal and what the measures you're going to put in place to ensure that they understood the data. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because when you shared the benchmark data with us, you led with an extensive piece on assessment literacy. So you were really intentional about making sure that we understood what the data meant first before you went through the data. And you spoke a little bit of what you would do to ensure that the parents also would get an understanding or giving them some assessment literacy. Can you speak a little bit to that?
So I'm a little lost in the question. So speak to how we would provide data literacy to our parents as part of the portal process?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So we are working with our parents, and our community engagement piece is huge across our division. Jamie Bowers is with us and can talk to specifically what she's doing, but I can speak at a high level. She is meeting with Sheila Jackson, several of our internal offices that do engage our communities with doing just this. And that is working with our parents to better understand the assessment data and what it means. Dr. Goldson, as we gear up for our release of the MCAT data this year, Dr. Goldson's also asked us to present PowerPoints or webinars anyway with our parents to give them a heads up of the different various state metrics that are going to be shared by the State Board of Ed. We're working on scheduling, I believe it's 2 now, 1, maybe 2. It's a lot of information. So it's hard to do it in one meeting and keep everyone's attention. So the first one we wish to present will be the MCAT data specifically around the time shortly after when we present the information to the board, which I believe is scheduled for the, well, we'll give you the specific dates here in a minute. The second one is after the state releases the board level information, which will be, I mean, the accountability related information will be during their February 28th board meeting, I believe. So we want to make sure that soon thereafter, after the information is released, we get it as soon as we can in your hands, and then follow up with those parent engagement activities so our parents can get a better understanding of what this means for them, specifically for their children. And I will follow up, yeah, and I will follow up with you as a question, as a response to the question, to give you the timelines of those activities. When we'll be presenting this information to you all, as well as like I was sharing those webinars to the parents.
Thank you. And that is really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question, Dr. Z. Miller. All right, colleagues, last call for questions around accountability and Dr. Strader before we move on to operations. All right, seeing no hands, thank you for your time. Dr. Strader, any last minute comments, words you want to say before you?
No, I just want to thank you all for your time. I'm joined here by several of my directors, Natasha Flood, Anthony Whittington, Jamie Bowers, Vanessa Weatherington. Thank you all for your time and joining us.
Thank you, and thank you to the team. Thank you for your questions and responses as well, colleagues and staff. All right, Dr. Fawcett, we're now shifting to operations. Again, reminder, colleagues, 5-minute round, then 3-minute round. We're going to try to keep it at the 30-minute mark so we can move on to our next session as well. So the floor is now open, colleagues, for questions around operations. And I'll jump in first. Dr. Fawcett, you and I have had some conversations around safety and security concerns, specifically throughout the district. Can you speak a little to how the budget reflects those plans for future either work groups or things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to take time at the beginning of my time here just to introduce my team. All of my directors are present, including Dr. Gary Cunningham, who is the Director of Security Services. We have Jason Washington, Director of our Alternative Infrastructure Office, Sean Matlock, who is Director of Capital Programs, Mr. Sam Stefanelli, Director of Building Services, Mr. Keith Stewart, Director of Purchasing and Warehouse Services. And we have also Ms. Joan Shorter, who is Director of Food and Nutritional Services. We're also accompanied tonight by my esteemed colleague, Social Superintendent Dr. Sharasco Coleman. And representing transportation tonight in Dr. Saunders' absence we have Mr. Tony Sproul and Mr. David Hill, who are operations supervisors. And we stand ready to answer all of your questions. And I will defer at this time to Mr. Cunningham to answer the first question in reference to how our budget reflects additions to our security services for next year and the things that we're doing and hopefully will do with the addition to our budgets.
Good evening, everyone. Again, Gary Cunningham, Director of Safety and Security. One of the things that we've done is looked at our staffing levels within safety and security. So we have added 9 additional positions. 7 of those positions will go directly to the schools. 7 security assistants will be added to our security force. We're adding alarm room monitors. So we are changing things and making additions in the next budget cycle.
And just to piggyback on that, Mr. Harris, we've also been looking at some different strategies in terms of things like artificial intelligence to actually do better monitoring of students entering the school. We've been meeting with vendors probably for the last 2 months out of the task force, trying to develop those priorities in terms of what we can add to our school. What we do know is that some of these security measures have large funding sources, and we would have to develop a strategy in terms of the rollout and what it would look like. But we're looking at different strategies to ensure that our students are safe and that we can reduce the number of unwanted weapons and other things that are coming into our schools. I think that the board knows that over the last 3 years, we've also developed a program where we've added single action locks to all of our classroom doors. We've used our Maryland Center for Safety grants, security grants over the last years to outfit every classroom in the school system with a single action lock, which allows students and staff to secure themselves inside of a classroom if a key is not available. We are on the last, I believe, 25% of schools, and we'll be finished with that. So our plans are next year to take that Maryland Safety and Security grant and put it towards these initiatives that we're talking about now.
Definitely. Thank you for your response. I know, like you said, some of these things come with big price tags, and not only the cost of installation, but also the cost of maintenance because you want your products to operate effectively. I know there's probably also some low-hanging fruit of things that we can begin to implement. Like you said, we're in the last 25% of schools now with a single action lock, but that is another conversation for another time. I'm going to try to stay focused on budget tonight. I'll pass it over to my colleague, Board Member Boozer Struther, for her questions. But thank you for your response, Dr. Fawcett and colleagues, and Mr. Cunningham, sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. And thank you, Dr. Fawcett. My question is sort of for kind of a painting a picture for our parents of how this budget will impact bus drivers and transportation. I know this is an overlap between HR and the transportation division, so as much that could be shared this evening about any new strategies and expectations around hiring and there being the number of bus drivers needed for next school year, if there's any new incentives built into this budget, any other strategies that you'll be implementing. And before I conclude, I just want to thank all of our bus drivers for staying with us this year, and you are much appreciated. Thank you.
So very quickly, I can say that our transportation department continues to be adequately funded. You know, as you just stated, our major issue is the lack of drivers, which is a national problem. But there are certain initiatives that we have room in this budget to support. So for instance, most of you know that recently there was legislation passed where we can use alternative vehicles to transport students. In other words, those type of vehicles, vans, passenger vans that do not need CDL drivers. So we are exploring that opportunity, and we have definitely allocated funds in our lease purchase agreement that we will be able to purchase vans if that is something that we as a system and community decide that there's a class of students that we may be able to transport those smaller numbers and things like those lower class vehicles.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I'm glad to hear the alternative vehicles is moving. And I do think that legislation needs some fixes to make it easier to implement. And that's something that the Policy and Governance Committee will certainly engage on. The other question I have is when you're looking at these alternative vans, will you be choosing electric from the get-go? Are you going to just move forward the electrification policy?
Yeah, so we've recently had a discussion, and I think that the board is also aware that we are moving to electrify our fleet as per the CCAP plan. We have some grant funding that we're using this year specifically for buses, but we did just have a conversation around the white fleet, as we call it, and our move to begin adding white fleet electric vehicles. We haven't specifically developed the plan on which vehicles we will purchase first, but one thing we have to be cognizant of, especially is time of route, how many miles and length. So we have to be strategic about what vehicles we purchase. What we do know, as we've learned from some of our neighboring LEAs, is that we want to make sure we have infrastructure in place, whether that be for cars or buses, prior to the purchase and bring them on board so that we're able to use them as soon as we get them. But electrifying our white fleet, whether it be the vans first or whether it be some of our more non-maintenance white fleet first, we're still in the midst of trying to decide how we'll do that.
All right, great. Thank you so much. That concludes my questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Boozer-Strother. Vice Chair Walker.
Hi, Dr. Fawcett. Thank you so much for first tackling safety and transportation. Two, I've already checked off my list. Thank you very much. My question for you tonight is around food and nutritional services. Inside of the core services to provide these nutritious meals to our students, I am wondering if you've considered if there's money that's going to be allotted to catering to the needs of our students who don't eat certain things like cheese, or they're vegan or vegetarian, or don't eat pork or beef. So if you can help me with that, that'll be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I could try to answer that question. I will defer to the Director of Food and Nutrition, Joan Shorter, because I'm definitely aware that some of those things are already in place, and we are continuing to do work in that. Ms. Shorter.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that question. We are looking into that. We're looking to vegan option. We also do special diets, kids with specific dietary concerns. We offer those. On our menu, Meal Viewer, we usually indicate what the product is, if it's a pork product or a beef product or chicken, what the contents of it, so that all can take a look to see if they're allergic to any items or they need any other special dietary concerns. So we are looking at sourcing some vegan options, some plant-based options. Right now, it's the industry, due to the pandemic, been shut down. So they're just up, our manufacturers are just up and coming now with research and development.
Thank you so much. Ms. Shorter, while I have you, I just want to make sure I understand. So if I look at the menu right now, I might see that there's beef or pork for Monday and Tuesday. If my child doesn't eat beef or pork, it's my responsibility to send a lunch with the child. Or are you saying that I can put in something where now my child doesn't have to eat meat or pork for Monday and Tuesday? Can you just clarify, please?
So on Meal Viewer, if on our website, so you can go onto Meal Viewer. If you go on the Food and Nutrition Services or menu, it'll take you to Meal Viewer, and then so it will identify the items on the menu for that particular day and what the contents are. So if there's an allergen, a peanut, if it's manufactured in a plant with peanuts, so all of those options. What we try to do is to have sandwiches like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or other vegetarian option every day for those students. So basically what we do is offer versus serve. So we do multiple choices on the menu, and it's up to the individual student to select what they want. So we try to cover all those bases as best as we can, given the products that we have or available for us at this time.
Thank you very much. And just to close out, to make sure I understand, we have options for our children also, because I know that I've been asked this. And so I want to make sure that I'm clear on my response to the parents inside of District 9 is that, if there's an allergy or your child doesn't eat a certain food for whatever reason, they can go online to Meal Viewer, to Meals, see what's happening, and then there's always an option for that child. However, what I think I understood is that inside of this budget, you are also looking to offer alternative meals that are not yet on the school budget, such as vegan or vegetarian and other options. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
Board Member Briggs.
Thanks so much, Dr. Harris, and hello, Dr. Fawcett. I had a few questions for you, and I wanted to start with the construction projects that are taking place for this year and continue to take place for the next 4 years in this first cycle. I get a lot of questions from members of the community around how that process is determined, and I think that there's a bit of opaqueness to it, not intentionally. I think it's just partly, a matter of folks following along. But I was hoping that you could clarify for members of the community, how are schools determined for renovation or modernization? And then as far as the scoring system goes, how is that updated yearly? So let's say, for example, schools in District 2 are going to be modernized this year. But next year, there may be schools that have more pressing issues, and based on kind of initial determinations from the original report, it needs to be updated. So can you just speak to, or someone on your team speak to, how are schools determined for renovation or modernization? And then also, how are those insights updated annually?
Absolutely. It's not a short answer question, but I will allow Mr. Matlock to address that, and he'll take us back to when we originally created or we had our systemic study on how we rank the schools. Mr. Matlock.
Yes. So thank you for having us. And originally, the school performed through a private vendor, Burrell Sourcing Dunleavy, a study back in 2015 that identified and ranked the schools based on both their physical, what we'll call the FCI, Facility Condition Index, and then they also rated it based on the educational efficacy of the building. That study was used to create some rankings of the schools, and then they were cycled by when they could be attended to in cycle 1, cycle 2, 3, and 4. Cycle 1 is the one that we're in now. Now, as far as that selection is concerned, it is determinant of where they are in the long-term modernization plan that we use through our EFMP, which is supplemented annually through our CIP, which is our budgeting process. Now, the thing is, we do have schools that have issues that arise. There are budgets for the full modernization, and then we have other projects that we do, which are countywide and sometimes state and county funded, which address specific issues that may arise. That may not be addressed in the EFMP or in the CIP until that issue arises. So we do advanced projects such as HVAC projects, full envelope renovations. We advance a lot of things that are not part of cycle 1, 2, or 3, because those are full modernizations as opposed to partial modernizations, which address those individual or episodic issues that may arise through deterioration. Now, it's clear, or it should be clear, that a building that was selected in cycle 2 is certainly going to be worse off 10 or 5 or 10 years later than it was when we originally ranked them. And so we try to address that through systemic projects, which is about 40% of our budget. And if we can't address it through that, and it has to be advanced further, we really can't move it completely forward, because it's much, because we have to kind of wait based on how much money we're spending, because whatever we spend in within 10 years of that construction, once the modernization starts, the state won't reimburse for that funding. So we have to be careful about when we put funding on a project and how much money we use for certain types of things. Now, that's generally how we handle it.
Okay, that's really helpful. And it sounds like I hear you saying that ultimately, whatever schools are determined for cycle one, those schools are kind of remaining the same. And then there are kind of individual offset projects. Apologies if you can hear anything in the background. There are individual projects outside of that that can be brought into the construction for each year. The other question I had was just to clarify for the private-public partnership piece that we have here. I know that I've had a few constituents reach out and, they've just mentioned, I think there's maybe either a little bit of misinformation, or perhaps you can provide some correction here around the cost and whether this is actually, costing the school district more based on this public-private partnership. So I was just hoping that someone could speak to that as my last question for this section.
Thank you. Director Washington, you want to take that question?
Sure. Thanks for the question. The cost and the determination for the public-private partnership, there was a value for money analysis that was put forth to determine the cost value for the school system based upon the package that was done. The assessment came back that using a traditional design bid build, we would be able to deliver the 6 schools that we're delivering now. It would take us 16 years to deliver those schools. In addition to cost of construction, which we anticipated to be a 5% annual increase that we were seeing in the area, we would still have over $230 million of deferred maintenance cost. Basically, to what Sean just pointed out, if there are issues that go on, even though we know we want to replace a school, we still have to go in and provide that work. So that value for money analysis came back that utilizing a public-private partnership would roughly cost, with interest included, roughly $990 million over the term of the agreement, which is 30 years. Using the traditional design bid build approach would come in at $1.1 billion. That is on the construction side. When you add in the maintenance piece of this, which is actually what strains our budget, or systemics and things of that nature that happen, it is it's roughly about 1.2 is the total cost of the program. So about that's the delta that's there. But part of that maintenance is a full system refresh on all 6 schools. So they would get all new systems at no additional cost than what we are paying for the availability payment for the schools. And so is it more expensive? Yes, it is, but it comes with a 30-year maintenance agreement that does not exist on any school that we have, that ensures that when we receive these buildings back, there will still be a minimum of 15 years useful life for all mechanical systems in the building, along with regular maintenance requirements that are set up in the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. I just want to add that the first part of your statement also, and that what it allows us to do is to get use and occupancy of those buildings within 2 years instead of 16, which is what it would have taken us based on the analysis to build all 6 of those schools. And that supports the school district, number one, in getting to our kids into more modern facilities, and number 2, helping us in terms of our enrollment process, our over enrollment issues.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Fox and Mr. Washington. I'm going to leave it there. I did have some follow-ups, but maybe I'll just ask those, send that directly to you as emails about this.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Briggs. Colleagues, we have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to go to Dr. Miller first, then Board Member Adam Stafford, then Board Member Jackson, and we'll close first round and then start second round. So Dr. Miller.
I'll be brief. Dr. Fawcett, we had discussed this some other earlier at some other time about the vans, and I wanted to know about the specialty programs which increased the busing of students to these programs. What impact is that going to have on our budget? And the second part of that is the drivers, the non-CDL drivers, will we have to get a special liability insurance for them? And is that included in the budget?
Yeah, so in terms of the specialty programs, we all know that, you know, specialty programs are important and we've added them over the years. What that does essentially is reduce the bus's opportunity to cover more schools. When you have a specialty program, you typically the bus is picking up over a larger area, which takes more time. So what that does is just basically decrease the route time. I'm sorry, decrease the amount of time that that bus can actually be on the road and pick up schools. We've tried to make adjustments for that in the recent future, is that when we are discussing building a specialty program or adding to it, sort of like we did when we added the middle schools immersion programs, is that transportation is now at the table. Anytime that we increase bus routes or we open new schools, additionally, we're going to have, you know, some addition of bus routes if a school is not closing. And of course, with the shortage of bus drivers, there's always going to be a deficit that we work from. But we continue to work feverishly, as I said earlier, to bring more bus drivers on. And until then, we'll continue to do the best we can to make it happen, to get everyone there on time. And in terms of the vans, we do know that if we develop a program where we're using passive vans, that there will be a different rate of insurance. We are a self-insured district. So I would have to get back to you if that means that our total rates will go up or not. And I believe that's something that we will explore in the process before we actually include the vans into our fleet.
Right, Board Member Adam Stafford. Thank you, Dr. Foster.
I just had one quick question. I wanted to know if retro pay for our current bus drivers is included in this current budget, and then I can email my other questions.
Okay, when you speak of retro pay for,
I believe that they are supposed to receive retro pay for a cost of living adjustment, but I'm just wondering if that was included in this budget.
so retro pay for all employees, I believe, will be getting the cost of living adjustment beginning July 1st. That would include bus drivers.
Okay, and that, okay. Thank you.
Not sure. I don't know, Dr. Goes, I saw you come on, is there?
And also all bus drivers who were due any retro pay, like, you know, for instance, they settled in July 1, but we needed to provide bus drivers during the summer retro pay. So all of that was included in this year's budget. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
FY2023's budget. For this past summer.
Yes. Yes.
Right. Board Member Jackson, you in a place you can ask your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
So my question is in regards to the P3 schools, the public-private partnership. So in regards to the scope of work of business that will be happening, is there an independent like audit board or some type of function that can hold the contractors or the private entity accountable to delivering according to the performance metrics set out in the scope of work? And if so, do they have, you know, any capability to, you know, incentivize or penalize the private entity based on either, you know, delivering early or later than, or, you know, waste of funds, or, you know, doing or being diligent with the funds? Like, do they have any function like that? So I guess that's a two-part question if you do.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can. First of all, we do not pay until schools are delivered. So there is no opportunity for waste of funds. The way that the contract is set up, we literally just paid what is known as a progress payment to pay down the additional debt. When the schools are delivered, if that is, and the due date has been set forth for the schools, they will receive what is known as a milestone payment which is the payment for the delivery of schools, and we move into availability payment structure. The availability payment is similar to a mortgage. It'll be a monthly payment. Our ability, the school system's ability, is that there is going to be an individual hired on my team whose whole job is to grade Honeywell, who is the maintenance provider, against I think there are 48 KPIs that they have to meet every month. Any failure to meet those are a deduction against that cost, that availability payment. That will be determined and approved by the steering committee, which is composed of the chairman of the county council, the county executive, and the CEO. That is a quarterly report that they receive that allows us the ability for deductions. Additionally, failure to respond is addressed in the contract as well. So for instance, if there is a major issue, a water spill or anything of that sort, there is a time frame set forth in the contract of which they must respond. If they fail to do so, they are penalized per hour until it's resolved. And so that is how it's set up to ensure compliance, is that we hit them where it matters. They don't get paid. And so that is the way that the contract is structured. Additionally, there are a maintenance report that is due every year that they have to provide in terms of their level of service, annually, 5-year and 10-year. And we are required to submit a report to the state to back up all of our reporting and the auditing that's done through the compliance and the deduction regime. So that is how we are protecting our interest to ensure that we are receiving the quality of maintenance services that we've contracted for.
I appreciate that. That's a great response. So, and I didn't catch it. Did you say who developed the key performance indicators?
We did through negotiations. So in the contract, it lays out literally a matrix of response times, what's covered, what's our responsibility, what's theirs. We have general custodial. They have the maintenance of the system. So filter changes, light bulbs, everything down to, we dictated how often they paint. They paint every 2 years on any covered surface. They're responsible for vandalism replacement. They're responsible for the grounds. They're responsible if somebody tears up a sidewalk. It is their responsibility to fix it. And so that is the way that the contract is structured at this point.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Board Member Booz Estrada, in the interest of time, do you mind writing down your questions for follow-up afterwards, since we do need to move on to the last section?
Sure.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you, Dr. Fawcett and team. I'm going to, any last comments from you, Dr. Fawcett?
I said thank you, and I appreciate it, and thank you to my team members who I introduced in the beginning for supporting tonight. Thank you.
Definitely. All right, so thank you. Moving right along, we're going to do school leadership and support with Dr. Coley next. How are you? Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
Good, good, good. All right,
Colleen. I'd like to begin, if you don't mind, by introducing the phenomenal team members that are with me this evening from the division. They are Dr. Elizabeth Faison from Student Services, Associate Superintendent, Dr. Cassandra Lassiter, Associate Superintendent for Elementary Schools, Dr. David Curry, Associate Superintendent from Middle and K-8 schools, Dr. Williams Horton, the Director of Community Schools, Dr. Carletta Merrill, the Associate Superintendent for High Schools, Ms. Liz Saunders, the Director for Charter Schools, and not with us this evening is Ms. Sheila Jackson, who is our Director of Family and Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So colleagues, the floor is now open for questions for school leadership and support. I see colleague Booz Estrada with her hand up, and then we'll move to Board Member Jackson. His hand is still up. I don't know if it's from the last round or not. Okay. Okay, both of you. Okay, both of you. Great. All right, Colin. Okay.
Dr. Harris, There
Yes.
were a couple of questions that were referenced previous by a couple of board members. I don't know if you would like for me to entertain those responses now or not.
The sure thing. I saw the hands go down again. Please proceed.
One of those questions was with reference to attendance and how we address attendance in our schools. Ironically, on next Wednesday, I believe it is, yes, February the 1st, we have our third Wellness Wednesday night for our parents, and the topic itself is specific to attendance. The Office of Accountability provides us with data monthly specific to our schools and the attendance of our students. What happens after that? We have many support mechanisms in place to include our community schools offer steering committee meetings, and one of the major topics during those meetings is student attendance. Following those meetings, the expectation is that individuals actually conduct site visits to those homes. Our Office of Student Services, the pupil personnel workers, they as well conduct site visits to homes of our students, and they as well often participate in the school attendance committee meetings, as well as those steering committee meetings in our community schools. The GEAR grant has been an offering provided to us, and through that GEAR grant, individuals participating through the grant have actually gone into some of the homes of our students when we see that they're becoming chronically absent to ensure that they're back in school. As we all know, in the absence of a student being in school each and every day, they miss out on pertinent instruction that would, of course, hinder them from achieving academically. So attendance is something that we are continuing to monitor very closely.
Thank you. I couldn't find the mute button. Thank you for addressing that. Colleagues, again, I see Vice Chair Walker. I'll yield the floor to you.
Hi, Dr. Coley, how are you?
Hello, Ms. Walker.
Hello. Yes, I had a couple of questions. The
Yes.
first is, where can you help me understand in the budget? I don't see it because I'm looking for it, and of course I'm asking you the question, I was looking for it. But
Okay.
the for specialty schools,
Yes.
sometimes they have program coordinators.
Yes.
And in their program coordinators, I was wondering if I was going to be seeing an increase in that, particularly as some of our specialty schools have been seeing an increase in their population for a number of reasons. So whether it be autism or whether it be I'm calling that a specialty school, Dr. Coley. My vernacular might not be correct, but are we adding in any folks in order to come in and help with that program coordination?
Now that it would depend upon each school. I'm not, to be honest with you, Ms. Walker, I'm not really clear on what you are asking me in terms of specialty schools.
Yes.
So if you're talking about our K-8 schools, if you're talking about some of our specialty programs that exist currently, it would differ depending upon that school. And quite frankly, it may be a question more relative to one of my colleagues.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Go
And,
ahead, Dr. Curry.
I want to be able to provide your response. I'm a little lost too when you say specialty schools.
That's
So
okay, because it's probably not a specialty school.
No.
So let me just be clear on my ask,
Okay.
because it just probably isn't the right word. The ask is this. And some of I'm going to use autism as an example of what I'm talking about, because I'm visiting schools and I'm seeing all the wonderful aspects of services that we are providing for our community. So in that, what I recognize, and this is just an example, it's across multiple schools if we dig deeper, is that there's program coordinators, for instance, that are needed in order to make sure that we're giving the best services for our scholars that are there. My question is, inside of this budget, if you could talk to me, just being new, on how we go about going from like a half a FTE to a full-time FTE, or where do I see that? I see in the book where the numbers go up, but I can't see in the book how we divvy that out per school. I'm looking per district, and how do I know if those program coordinators are going towards the schools that I'm mistakenly calling specialty? So what are they called? And that's what I'm talking about. Does that help at all?
Somewhat, and it's okay.
Okay.
I mean, I understand this is a learning experience, but what I can promise you, that we will take that question and
Thank
get
you.
back to you with the
Thank
answer.
you.
And then if our response is not specific to what you're trying to
Thank
ask,
you.
then we will continue to provide those responses accordingly.
Okay, the second one is going to be easier to ask, and it's okay if you have to get back to me, okay? The second question that I have is on school supplies. That is you, correct? Because I'm talking to the right person this time, right?
It's a couple of us, but yes, you're talking to the right person. You good with
Yes,
that?
excellent. I would like to understand, I'm sure I'm not the only parent who at the start of the school year, we do drives and we're coming out of pocket. So are our teachers that are here. And so what I'm looking to understand is if inside of this budget, are we allotting for additional funds to be able to help with basic things like paper and printers and things that they need daily? Let me tell you why I'm asking in comparison, not only because parents are coming out and teachers are coming out of their pockets, I recognize that, but then in comparison to some of the other schools as I walk in, they have these things at nauseum. And I'm just wondering, maybe it's the funding from PTO, but if you can just help me understand if we have funding that's there specifically to help our teachers to reduce the cost that they're giving up front. That one should be
Absolutely.
easier. Okay. thank you,
It
Dr.
is
Hope.
much easier because we've been talking about this for some years now. And I must share with you, we're working on common school supply lists across the schools. There are times when, as you've referenced, PTOs, PTAs step in and they offer other items in excess of what we provide. But we are not asking any school, any parent to purchase paper for a student. We're not asking that. And if that is on a list, it should not be. We're not asking any parent to purchase those supplies such as crayons, such as those supplies as markers. Now, there may be some things that are asked specific to the type of program that exists within a school, but there is a limit to what we are asking our parents to pay for as a support to our students and our schools.
Thank you.
And if I could, I see my colleague trying to jump in. I'll defer to you, Dr. Curry.
No,
And then I'll come back.
I appreciate that. I did just want to take a quick opportunity to respond to the first question. So even when you say specialty schools, whether it be one of our specialty programs, immersion programs, et cetera, and or if you're talking about provision of coordinators for, increased numbers in special education, an example you gave in autism, that staffing and where you may find it is actually on the academic side of the budget. In regards to staffing both the specialty schools and programs related to special education, we do that in collaboration with our partners in that office. And so oftentimes that determination is based on the number of service hours when you're talking about coordinators related to special education. And then all of our schools specific to whatever their specialty is in their school, whether it be immersion, Montessori, et cetera, are typically staffed with one coordinator unless the population or enrollment deems that there's more, but at this time, that hasn't been the case.
No, thank you for that. And I also got the right vernacular for the 3 different categories right there. Thank you, Dr. Curry.
And the only other thing I wanted to add in relation to school supplies, because we provide a lot at the schoolhouse. So we have a very, very generic school supply list across the board at each level. And on that list, it's a very short list. So there shouldn't be a lot of things that schools are requesting from parents, because we definitely have it. It is aligned in their budget in classroom teacher supplies and materials of instruction.
Thank you for your response, Vice Chair Walker. Good to go. All right, Board Member Adam Stafford.
Thank you so much. Hi, Dr. Coyley. I wanted to ask a question about, of course, my page just went away. Okay. I had asked a question in a previous board meeting about some preventative measures for resolving student conflict. So I know I've, talked to a lot of community members just about some of the challenges around behavior and students fighting and some of the challenges that students generally are just facing after, coming back from the COVID break. And whether the school district had considered conflict resolution resources as like a preventative step or a preventative measure. And so I wanted to know if there were some specific opportunities for maybe like community conflict resolution groups to support schools. I know there is one group in Prince George's County that does work with some specific schools, like on peer mediation opportunities and mediation maybe as like a referral, but I didn't know if there were any like specific preventative programs that you all were considering this upcoming year.
Yeah, I think that was one of the questions that we addressed in the questions provided to us. And specifically, we do provide peer mediation programs. And we as well have resolution of restorative practices approaches that are occurring in our schools as well. So those are some of the practices and processes. We also are finding that many of our students are participating in looking at our Hazel Health component. With our Hazel Health, I spoke to a representative not too long ago, and to date, we have 9,000 parents that have signed consent forms. Of those 9,000 parents that have signed consent forms, we have about 700 students that have been seen recently over the course of this school year already through our Hazel Health program. In addition to that, and speaking to the representative, another component of that is going to be our mental health component of Hazel Health, which we already have about 220 parents that are on the waiting list to be seen with respect to that. In addition to there being a clinician at many of our schools to address conflicts that do occur from some of our students for varied reasons. So I wanted to bring that to your attention as well, but we certainly do have restorative approaches. We've had that for some years. We're continuing to provide those opportunities for professional learning with our staff members. The conflict from our peer mediation program, that is housed under the Office of Student Services, that is ongoing as well to provide their support to our students.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited to hear about the Hazel program. A parent came up to me and was so excited about it, and she showed me, and I'm just, you know, over the past few years, I know that's been a priority for the board. So I just wanted to commend you all on that program. I wanted to also just ask a question regarding your restorative practice approach. I know in recent years, I've put forward an amendment to switch that training to be during the school day. And I wanted to just offer this as a question, you know, have you all considered, instead of using it as an individual teacher professional development and possibly piloting it as a school-based program, like where an entire school undergoes the training? I mean, in my experience, I've seen this approach be very successful because it does take an entire school community to really do it with fidelity. And so it's just, I know we may not be able to get into the details of that now, but perhaps it can be another conversation, but that was just something I wanted to throw out there. But thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fields, and then Mr. Briggs.
Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Coley, under the blueprint, there's an opportunity for a significant increase in Judy centers across the state. And given what we just heard about the addition of Title I schools, is there any thought of applying for additional funds for Judy centers in our county?
Mr. Fields, thank you for that question. That does in fact have to be a question from academics in the assignment of the Judy centers to through that particular department. But it does not mean that we will not get back to you with regard to your question that you've asked with a response.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Briggs and colleagues, this will be the last question to keep us in line with the public. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Coley. I just had a quick question about the amount of students that'll be coming in for this year. So I know that Prince George's County uses a student-based budgeting model, which provides per pupil funding for the amount of students that are at a particular school. And I know an earlier question came about district redistricting, and certain schools will have more students and other schools will have less. So I'm just curious if you, and you've already answered this question, but just wanted to do it for the record, if you could share, when can the CEO's office share the updated weighted student formula with the projected 134,000 students that is included in the budget document for the public?
I thank you for that question. and we will provide a response, but that is not an answer that I can provide you with. I'll defer to our CEO, or we can put that as one of the questions that we will provide a response to you at a later date.
It falls under budget, which is on next week, so we'll have them respond. Thank you.
But thank you for that question, Mr. Briggs.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Dr. Coley. Any last minute comments from you or your team? Dr. Coley? No? Okay, good to go.
And
Well,
thank you all.
so.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank
being
you,
here
team.
tonight. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. One last thing for me before I turn it back over to our chair, Mickens Murray. Colleagues, I've asked Ms. Howell to reopen our board member budget question sheet that we have. It has a new tab on it for questions tonight that you did not get a chance to get answered. That tab will close tomorrow at close of business. Tomorrow, close of business, 4 p.m. That tab will close. We want to make sure we can compile the notes that we have from staff with those additional questions that you do have, so that they can get us responses in a timely fashion. I will be sending you an email quickly so that you don't have to look through and find that link again, but just let you know that is coming, close of business tomorrow. Thank you. Back to you, Board Chair Mickens Murray.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harris. And I must say, thank you to Ms. Howell, Dr. Hersman, the budget team, to the divisions, and especially to our board staff who prepared this meeting, Ms. Lopez, Ms. Adeline, and Ms. Barton. You guys did a fantastic job, and board members, thank you for coming prepared. I think this was a good collaborative conversation, and we look forward to, I think it's February 12th. So going with my agenda here, the next steps. The division chiefs, please take under advisement the recommendations made this evening by board members as you proceed with the development of the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget. If there are no additional questions, board members, do you have any final questions?
Just one correction, Chair. Just one correction. It'll be February 2nd. February 2nd is the next work session.
February 2nd, I misspoke. I'm sorry. Thank you. So if there are no other comments and corrections, may I have a motion to adjourn the January 26, 2023 budget work session?
Sorry, Chair Mickens Murray, I apologize. I couldn't get to my unmute in time. I did just also want to recognize Miss Ellis, who is sick tonight and couldn't be, staff member Ellis, who is sick tonight and couldn't be on a call, but she also assisted in preparation and ensuring that we were all here tonight. Thank you.
Okay, then, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any more comments from any board members?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded to adjourn this hearing. All in favor say aye.
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 The ayes have it. This concludes the January 26, 2023 fiscal year 2024 budget work session. For those who will be joining us for the fiscal year 2024 budget public hearing at 7 p.m., the meeting will be accessed using a different Zoom link. To the public, you can find the budget public hearing Zoom link by visiting the board webpage. To board members, this link can be found in your email. Thank you for those of you transitioning to the next meeting. See you in 3 minutes. Thank you.
Mr.